I still remember the exact moment I knew things were going to change between me and Jake, though at the time, I thought he was just crashing on my couch for a night or two after his breakup. Turns out, he wasn't just looking for a place to sleep, he was looking for something a lot more permanent without even realizing it yet. So here's how it went down. Jake and I have been best friends since college, like inseparable. The kind of friendship where people always joked we should just get a room and save everyone the awkwardness. Which, honestly, wasn't completely off base. We've always been close, but never in a romantic way. Or at least, I thought so. Anyway, fast forward a few years after graduation, and Jake calls me around midnight, voice shaky and kinda raw. He'd just gotten out of a pretty nasty breakup, and the guy had been a total jerk. Ghosting, mixed signals, all the cliche stuff. Jake sounded like he was on the verge of a meltdown, which is not something I've ever really seen from him. He was vulnerable in a way that surprised me. I told him, "You can come over, man. My couch is yours." When he showed up, he looked different. Messy hair, clothes half on, eyes that had been crying for hours. He didn't say much, just flopped down on my couch like it was the only place in the world he felt safe. I made some coffee, sat beside him, and we just sat there in silence for a bit. It was weird, because even though he was hurting, there was this quiet relief in his expression, like maybe he needed someone to just be there. We ended up talking for hours that night, about everything and nothing. The breakup, his fears, random memories from college, dumb jokes we hadn't laughed at in years. I realized then how much I'd missed this part of him. The real Jake. Not the cool, put-together guy he showed the world. And for the first time, something shifted in me. I started noticing the little things. The way his hand brushed against mine when he reached for a mug. How his laugh sounded when he wasn't trying to hide it. I thought it would be just a night, maybe two, but by the third morning, he still hadn't moved out. He didn't say anything about staying longer, but I guess neither did I. There was this unspoken understanding, like we both knew the old dynamic wouldn't work anymore. Now, here we are a few weeks later, and Jake's still here. And something tells me maybe this is exactly where he was supposed to be all along. But if you'd asked me that first night, I probably would have told you I was just helping a friend in need. If only I had known how much more complicated and a lot more real it was about to get. Living with Jake wasn't something I'd ever planned for, but it didn't feel awkward or forced. It was like we just slid into this new rhythm without really noticing. He'd get up around noon, sleep still heavy in his eyes, and I'd already be halfway through my morning coffee. Sometimes I'd tease him about being a professional sleeper, and he'd roll his eyes but smile. One day, about a week after he moved in, we were sitting in my tiny kitchen, the kind of space that makes you bump elbows if you're not careful. Jake was poking at a sad-looking salad I'd thrown together. He kept asking if I was trying to starve him, and we were watching some half-baked cooking show on TV. "So, what now?" I asked, half joking, half serious. I mean, this was his rebound crash pad, right? He'd get his feet under him, find another place, and I'd get my living room back. Jake shrugged, chewing slowly. "Honestly, no idea. I'm just tired of pretending like everything's fine, not just with him, but with myself. I don't even know what I want anymore." That hit me harder than I expected. Here was my best friend, the guy I'd always admired for his confidence and charm, admitting he was lost. And I realized how little I actually knew about what went on inside his head. For the first time, I started paying attention to the cracks beneath the surface. The way he'd sometimes stare out the window for minutes, like he was searching for something that wasn't there. Or how he'd flinch if I reached to touch his arm, like he wasn't used to being comforted. One night, maybe 2 weeks in, we ended up on my couch again, the same spot where he'd first crashed after the breakup. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the city outside and the occasional clinking of ice in his glass. "You ever think about what this all means?" Jake asked, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the ceiling. "What? Like life? Love? The universe?" I teased, nudging him. "Yeah, all of it. I keep wondering if I'm just messing everything up." I looked at him, really looked at him. The way his voice cracked a little on, messing everything up. The vulnerability he was so good at hiding before. "Jake," I said quietly, You're not messing anything up. You're just figuring things out. And whatever happens, you're not alone. He turned to me then, and for a second, the usual walls around him fell away. His eyes found mine, searching, maybe hoping for something. "Thanks," he whispered. That word hung in the air between us, heavier than I expected. We sat there, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. Over the next few days, I started noticing little things. How he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The casual touches that lingered a beat too long. The way his voice softened when he talked to me. I could tell he was struggling with something, but neither of us said it out loud. One afternoon, we were sprawled on the floor in my living room, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and half-finished board games, when he suddenly paused and looked at me. "What if I'm not ready to jump back into anything?" he said, voice low. I nodded because, honestly, I wasn't sure what I was ready for either. "Maybe we don't have to figure it all out right now," I said. "Maybe we just take it one day at a time." He smiled then, that genuine, messy smile that made my heart do something dumb and unexpected. And just like that, the line between friendship and something more started to blur. I wasn't sure where we were headed, but for the first time in a long time, I wanted to find out. Taking it one day at a time sounded like a good plan, but I wasn't prepared for how much that would mess with my head. Because the more time Jake spent around me, the more everything started feeling different. Like the air between us was thick with stuff we weren't saying, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of every look, every touch, every shift in his tone. One evening, a little over 3 weeks since he moved in, we found ourselves sitting on the fire escape outside my apartment. It'd been a long day, and neither of us felt like pretending to be fine anymore. The city lights flickered below us, a distant hum of cars and life we were momentarily detached from. Jake lit a cigarette, which was weird for him since he wasn't really a smoker, but I guess stress makes you do strange things. I watched the smoke curl up into the night sky and then back down into his face, softening his features in this way that made my chest ache. "You ever think about how weird it is," he started, "that I've been here for almost a month now? Like I'm technically living with you. And it doesn't feel like some awkward guest thing." I shrugged, trying to sound casual, but my heart was pounding. "Yeah, it feels like we accidentally built a little life here." He laughed quietly. "Yeah, accidental roommates. Sounds about right." Then he turned to me, eyes searching again, and I swear I could see the same question forming on his lips that I'd been trying to ignore myself. "Do you ever think about us, like, not just friends?" There it was, the question that had been hanging over us, unspoken but heavy. My mouth went dry, and I had to take a moment to figure out how to answer without making things weird. "Honestly, yeah," I admitted after a beat. "I think about it a lot more than I probably should." Jake's smile was small but real, like he was relieved to hear it. Me too. For a while, we just sat there, the night wrapping around us like a secret. Then he reached out, and his hand found mine on the fire escape railing. It was tentative at first, like testing the waters, but when I didn't pull away, his fingers intertwined with mine, warm and steady. That simple touch sent a jolt through me, and suddenly the lines we'd drawn between friendship and whatever this was started to blur in a way that was both terrifying and thrilling. We stayed out there for a while longer, talking about everything and nothing, our fears, hopes, dumb little memories from college, and that weird, uncharted space between us we were both navigating. Eventually, Jake leaned his head on my shoulder, and I didn't move away. Instead, I rested my head against his and let the moment wash over me. It felt like the first time in weeks that either of us had truly exhaled. The next morning was awkward in the best way. We didn't talk about what happened on the fire escape right away. It was like we'd silently agreed to let things unfold naturally, without pressure or expectations. Days turned into weeks, and our routine settled into something that felt more like us. We cooked dinner together, argued over what movie to watch, shared playlists, and sometimes just sat in comfortable silence. Jake even started leaving some of his clothes in my closet, a quiet sign that maybe he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. One night, after a particularly bad day at work for both of us, we found ourselves on the couch again, feet tangled, and bodies close enough to share warmth. Jake looked at me and said, I don't want to go back to who I was before. Not without you. My heart did that stupid, awkward flip again. Neither do I. It was the first time I said it out loud, but I meant every word. Because Jake wasn't just my best friend anymore. He was becoming something I never expected, but couldn't imagine living without. And as I looked at him there, vulnerable and real, I realized that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. Like a friendship that turns into something more, not with fireworks or grand confessions, but with quiet moments and a hand to hold when everything else falls apart. I don't know what the future holds for us, but right now, with Jake by my side, it feels like maybe we're exactly where we're supposed to be. After that night on the couch, things started to get complicated in the best possible way. It was like we were both stepping into this new territory without a map, figuring out the rules as we went. But even with all the uncertainty, there was this quiet excitement in the air, like finally admitting to ourselves that what we had wasn't just friendship anymore. One Saturday morning, Jake was humming in the kitchen, making pancakes in his usual half-assed way, flipping them with a confidence he definitely didn't have. I sat at the counter, nursing a mug of coffee, watching him grin like a kid who'd just cracked some secret code. "You know," he said, flipping a pancake over, "I think I'm starting to like this whole living together thing. Even if you're terrible at making coffee." I laughed because he wasn't wrong. My coffee was usually a disaster. Hey, I'm more of a pour and hope kind of guy. Jake slid a plate across the counter to me, pancakes stacked unevenly and dripping with syrup. "Well, at least you're consistent." We ate in comfortable silence for a bit, the kind where you don't feel the need to fill every second with chatter. But then he glanced up at me, eyes bright but serious, and said, "Have you thought about what this means? Us, I mean." I set my fork down, heart skipping, every day. He swallowed hard, like he was struggling to find the right words. "I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to lose you, whether as a friend or whatever this is." I feel the same, I admit it, which is scary, but also kind of amazing. There it was. The honest truth no one says out loud because it's terrifying to admit you want more from someone you've been friends with forever. Over the next few days, the quiet moments between us grew heavier with meaning. A touch on the arm lingered, a glance held a little longer, and every time our hands accidentally met, my stomach did that familiar twist. I was falling for him, hard, and it felt like he was falling too, but with that excitement came this underlying fear. What if it didn't work out? What if we lost everything? One night, sitting on the balcony with beers in hand and the city glowing below, I decided to bring it up. "Jake," I started, voice a little shaky, "do you ever worry that this, us, might ruin our friendship?" He looked at me, thoughtful. "All the time. But then I think about what it would be like not to try, to pretend like we're just friends when I want more. That's a worse kind of loss." His honesty hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt this overwhelming urge to tell him everything. The way my chest tightens when he's near, how I catch myself imagining a future with him, stupid little daydreams I never thought I'd have. Before I could say anything, Jake leaned over and kissed me. It was soft and tentative, like we were both afraid to break the spell. But as the seconds stretched, it grew more confident, more certain. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathless and grinning like idiots. "So," Jake said, brushing a stray hair from my forehead, "guess we're doing this." "Yeah," I replied, heart pounding. "Guess we are." The days that followed were a whirlwind of discovering what it meant to be more than friends. We navigated awkward first dates, not with other people, but with each other, learning how to be lovers without losing the friendship that was the foundation of everything. There were moments of doubt, of course, like that time I misread something he said and ended up sulking in my room for hours, convinced I'd ruined it all. But Jake came in, sat beside me, and reminded me that the real strength of what we had was in how we communicated, how we came back to each other after the rough patches. One afternoon, while we were sprawled out on the couch watching a terrible rom-com, Jake nudged me and said, "You know, I think this might actually be the best thing that ever happened to me." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Me too." Looking back now, it's crazy to think how one broken night, one couch, and one messy breakup led us here, falling in love in the most unexpected, beautifully imperfect way. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. The thing about falling for your best friend is that it doesn't come with a rule book. There's no guide on how to navigate the shift from inside jokes and shared playlists to stolen kisses and late-night confessions. We stumbled through it, messy and uncertain, but somehow it felt right. One weekend, Jake and I decided to take a day trip out of the city. We rented a car. Well, I did, since I have a license, and he claims relying on public transport is a life skill, which, fair. But the point is, we drove out to this little lake a few hours away. Neither of us had been there before. It was supposed to be a break from everything, a reset. We showed up to this tiny cabin we'd booked online, a cozy place with creaky wooden floors and big windows that looked out over the water. Jake immediately kicked off his shoes like a kid on summer vacation, grinning like he'd found a secret treasure. We spent the day wandering along the shore, talking about everything from dreams we'd long forgotten to stupid fears. Like how Jake's convinced that if he ever tried yoga, he'd just snap in half. I laughed so hard I almost fell into the lake. Later that evening, we cooked dinner together, fumbling with the stove and arguing about how much garlic was too much. The kitchen filled with smoke and laughter. And it occurred to me then how much I wanted these simple moments with him, the quiet and the chaos. After dinner, we moved to the porch with mugs of hot tea. The sky was clear, stars scattered like glitter, and the silence between us wasn't empty, but full with the kind of comfort that only years of knowing someone can bring. Jake broke the silence first. Do you ever think about what comes next? After all this? I shrugged, staring at the dark water. I try not to. I'm scared of ruining what we have. He nodded slowly. Me too, but maybe it's not about not messing up. Maybe it's about trying anyway. That felt like a promise, and more than that, a challenge I wanted to accept. The next morning before we left, Jake surprised me by pulling me aside. His face was serious, but his eyes were soft. Hey, whatever happens, I want you to know this. Being with you feels like coming home. I swallowed the lump in my throat, the words hitting me harder than I expected. Feels the same for me. Back in the city, life didn't suddenly get easier. We had to figure out how to balance work, social lives, and this new relationship that felt both fragile and fierce. There were days when old insecurities bubbled up. Days when Jake would get quiet or I'd overthink every text. But each time, we talked, we listened, we reminded each other why we were doing this. One night, after a particularly long day, we found ourselves curled up on the couch, neither of us wanting to move. Jake looked up at me, his usual playful smirk replaced by something more vulnerable. Do you think we're getting better at this? Us? He asked. I smiled, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. Yeah, we're learning. And honestly, I think we're pretty damn good at it. He laughed, leaning into me, and I realized then that no matter what the future held, we'd already found something rare and real, something worth fighting for. Looking back on everything, the late-night calls, the tears, the laughter, the first kiss on the fire escape, I'm grateful that Jake stayed, not just as my best friend, but as the person who taught me what it means to love and be loved in return. Sometimes love sneaks in when you least expect it, in the form of a broken heart and a couch that turns into a home. And that's a story I'm still telling, one day at a time. Over the next few months, the easy comfort Jake and I found in each other started to deepen in ways I hadn't quite expected. Living together meant we saw each other at our best and worst. And weirdly enough, that made everything feel more real. Not just a story or some fleeting thing, but something solid, messy, and absolutely ours. One evening, I came home later than usual from work. The city had been biting cold that week, and I was dragging my feet through the door, already dreading the mountain of emails waiting for me. But when I opened the door, the apartment was warm and smelled like cinnamon and something sweet. Jake was in the kitchen, humming to himself while pulling a tray of cookies out of the oven. "Hey, stranger," he said with that goofy grin I'd come to know so well. "Long day?" "You have no idea," I muttered, dropping my coat and sinking onto the couch. "I'm running on fumes." Jake carried the cookies to the coffee table, sitting beside me and handing me a warm one. "Well, consider this a bribe to get you to smile." I took a bite, and the sugar hit my system like a minor miracle. I let out a laugh, the tension in my shoulders finally easing. Okay, I'll give you that one. We settled into a comfortable silence, the kind where words aren't necessary because just being near each other says enough. After a bit, Jake nudged me and said, "You know, I was thinking we should take a trip. Just the two of us. Somewhere that isn't work or life or this apartment." I looked at him, surprised but intrigued. "Like where?" He shrugged, eyes sparkling with that mischievous glint I loved. "I don't know. Maybe a cabin in the mountains? Or a beach somewhere warm? Somewhere we can just be." I smiled, the idea growing on me fast. "Yeah, I think that sounds perfect." Planning the trip gave us both something to look forward to, a little escape from the everyday grind. But as the date got closer, I noticed Jake getting quieter, more reserved. One night, over dinner, I finally asked him what was going on. "Nothing," he said, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. "Jake, come on. You're acting like you're carrying the weight of the world." He sighed and looked down at his plate. "I guess I'm just nervous. About us. About what this means." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Hey, whatever it is, we're in it together. No pressure, no expectations. Just us." He nodded slowly, squeezing my hand back. "Yeah, just us." The weekend we left felt like stepping into a different world. Crisp mountain air, endless trees, and a cozy little cabin that smelled like pine and possibility. We spent our days hiking, laughing at how out of shape we both were, and our nights curled up by the fire, sharing stories and dreams we hadn't said out loud before. One night, as the fire crackled between us, Jake looked over and said, "I think I'm falling for you." My heart skipped and a smile spread across my face. "Yeah, I think I've been falling for you since day one." We laughed, the kind of laughter that comes from relief and joy all at once. It wasn't a grand, sweeping declaration, just two guys admitting something they both felt deep down. When we got back to the city, everything felt a little different. Not because things had changed overnight, but because we had. We had this quiet understanding that we were building something real, something that could last. Of course, life threw in its usual curveballs. Work stress, family drama, and the occasional fight, reminding us that no relationship is perfect. But through it all, Jake and I kept coming back to each other, holding on tighter with every challenge. One night, after a particularly rough week, I found myself sitting on the edge of the bed, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Jake came in, sat beside me, and wrapped his arms around me without a word. Sometimes, love isn't about big gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes, it's just showing up, over and over again. And that's what Jake did, for me and for us. Now, as I look back on that night when he first crashed on my couch, I realize it wasn't just about a friend needing a place to stay. It was the beginning of something neither of us saw coming, but both of us desperately needed. He stayed, and in staying, he changed my life. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of love story worth telling. It's funny how the smallest moments can end up meaning the most. Like, not some grand gesture or cinematic scene, but those quiet, everyday bits that build the foundation of a life together. I think that's what Jake and I had, those little fragments of normalcy that stitched us closer without either of us really noticing, at first take last week, for example. I was sitting on the couch, half watching some old sitcom reruns while working on a report for work. Jake was in the kitchen, making what I can only describe as a creative dinner. His attempt at pasta with a sauce he swore was better than anything from a restaurant. I was skeptical but hungry enough to trust him. Out of nowhere, he poked his head around the corner, flour dusting his hair like some rogue baker, and said, "Hey, you know what I just realized?" I looked up, eyebrow raised. "What?" He grinned, that smirk that always made my chest do that dumb flip. "I'm basically living proof that you can survive on frozen pizza and bad decisions." I laughed, shaking my head. "Yeah, but now you're also the master chef of questionable sauces." We ate together, plates in hand, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor because apparently my dining table was too formal. We talked about everything and nothing, the kind of conversations that made me feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Later that night, Jake curled up against me on the couch, his head resting on my chest as I absent-mindedly traced patterns on his arm. It was one of those perfect, simple moments, the kind you tuck away in your mind for the times when life gets messy. But just because things felt good didn't mean the path ahead was going to be easy. We both had scars from the past, insecurities that crept in when we least expected them. One afternoon, Jake came home looking a little off. His usual easy smile was missing, replaced by a tightness around his eyes. I asked him what was wrong, but he just shrugged it off, saying it was nothing. I didn't buy it. Later that night, after we turned off the lights and the city noise had quieted down, Jake finally opened up. It's just, sometimes I wonder if I'm ready for this. For us. What if I mess it up again? I pulled him closer, feeling the tremble in his voice beneath the surface. Hey, you're not alone in this. We're figuring it out together. He looked up at me, eyes glistening in the dim light. I don't want to lose what we have. You won't, I promised. Not if I have anything to say about it. Those moments, the fears, the doubts, they're part of the package. But so is the resilience we've built side by side. A few days ago, Jake surprised me completely. He came home holding a small box, all nervous energy, and a smile that was half excitement, half please don't freak out. What's this? I asked, curiosity winning over suspicion. He shrugged, face flushed. I thought maybe we could start a little tradition, like a physical reminder of us, something we add to every year. I opened the box and found 2 delicate keychains shaped like puzzle pieces. They fit perfectly together. It's cheesy, Jake admitted, but it felt right. I looked up at him, heart warm and full. It's perfect. We clipped them to our keys that night, a tiny symbol of something huge, of a friendship that turned into love, of broken hearts that found healing, of 2 people choosing each other every day. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about how different things might have been if Jake hadn't knocked on my door that night, broken and unsure, how I might have missed out on this, on us. But then I remind myself that life has a funny way of working out, that sometimes the best things come from unexpected places, like a friend who stays a little longer and ends up staying forever. And honestly, I'm grateful every single day that he did. A few nights ago, Jake and I were sitting on the fire escape again, the same one where, months ago, he first took my hand without either of us knowing how much that simple touch would change everything. This time, the city felt quieter, like it was holding its breath with us. We weren't chasing grand moments or trying to define what we had. We just sat there, shoulders touching, watching the stars spill across the sky. Jake leaned his head on my shoulder, and I felt this quiet contentment settle deep in my chest. I'm glad you stayed, I said softly. He smiled, eyes closed. Me too. I'm glad I found home in you. It hit me then, how far we'd come from that broken night when he first knocked on my door, vulnerable and unsure. We'd navigated the messiness together, learning to be patient with each other's fears and flaws, and in doing so, built something steady and real. Love, I realized, isn't always about fireworks or perfect timing. Sometimes, it's about showing up. Being there in the quiet moments, the messy days, and the in-between spaces where life actually happens. Jake shifted so he was looking at me, a little nervous but steady. I don't know what the future holds, but I want to keep figuring it out with you. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Me too. One day at a time. That night, as we climbed back inside, I felt something settle inside me, a sense of peace and hope I hadn't known I needed. Because sometimes, the best stories aren't the ones you plan or expect. They're the ones that find you when you least expect it, in the shape of a broken friend who turns into so much more. And as Jake stayed not just on my couch but in my life and heart, I knew I'd never be the same. And I wouldn't want to be. We were messy, imperfect, and real. And that was more than enough.